go on a little walkabout of knowledge.
In the 1750s, a power-hungry charlatan convinced thousands of Jews to join his cult. A cult that ended up putting hundreds of thousands in danger. This is the story of Jacob Frank.
And even today, anytime there's sex, you see the word sex cult, right? Sometimes there's just a different way of doing sexuality.
It is the Frankists who are bringing down America.
Hell-bent on destroying everything of value in our culture.
Growing up, Jacob Frank's family secretly believed a man who had died 50 years ago, Shabtai Tzvi, was the Messiah. Now, hope for a Messiah coming, that has a long history in Judaism, but actual belief that one is already here, that the one's already come, that's very much frowned upon. Seen as heretics, they were banished from their Jewish community and moved to a town with many secret followers of Shabtai Tzvi, Sabbateans. Now, his teacher told him that once he got married, he'd be officially initiated into this secret society of believers. And at his wedding, two emissaries do just that. He follows in the path of his Messiah and is brought on as a missionary. But Frank is, quote, domineering to the point of despotism, and he finds this sect to be an empty house. So in Poland, instead of working as a missionary, he forms a new center. He calls himself the third incarnation of the divine soul, a new Messiah? The story goes, to get attention, he pulls off a stunt. He puts the crown of a Torah on a naked woman. As a group dances around her, he intentionally leaves the window open so they'll be discovered, which they are. The local rabbis feel this is way beyond their local Jewish court system, so they escalate this to the bishop, the local bishop, and say, deal with these heretics. Frank and his people say, we're not heretics, we're the closest Jews come to Christianity. If anything, you should get rid of those other guys, they're all Jews. So the bishop agrees to have these two groups debate. Frank and his followers win the bishop over by saying, we're the same, we also believe that a human Messiah is God. They're referring to a different guy, of course, but the bishop was happy to play along, as it was their second point that he really wanted to hear. That the Jewish book of laws, the Talmud, was nonsense. It's a way to say that Christianity gets things right, and Judaism does not.
When you're reported as a heretic, like, you're going to be put to death, right? So this would have been a mass execution of like 3,000 people.
That is Jay Michelson, author of this book and person who kept me honest.
So, you have an incentive to say what you need to say, right? Maybe appease the authorities who had a knife to their neck.
The bishop has hundreds of these Talmuds burned, which is awful for these Jewish communities who are terrified this is going to escalate. Instead, a few months later, the bishop dies, and the higher-ups in the church overturn the ruling. They don't want this trouble. Instead, the church banishes Frank and his group. So they flee and create a new center here. Frank appoints 12 brothers and 12 sisters. Well, he uses the word sisters, but he's having sex with them, so that's happening. It's hard to say what level of sexual deviancy is happening. The sources disagree, but it's definitely not what either the Jewish world or the Christian world would be fans of.
Frank is still a bad guy. We don't have records of him getting a lot of consent from all of his followers, especially his female followers. He's manipulative and he's abusive to his close followers, to the brothers and the sisters. So he's still a bad guy.
Wild rumors start flying around about this group. Quote, among the mass of Jews, the idea spread that Frank was, in reality, a great sorcerer with far-reaching demonic powers, prompting the growth of various legends, which had wide repercussions concerning his magic deeds and his success. Meanwhile, some Christian authorities were looking for some excuse to pin the blood libel on all Jews. Now, the blood libel is an old anti-Semitic trope saying that Jews were using blood to make ritual bread. No basis in truth. Nothing good has come from it, and it just kind of kept resurging over and over, including at this time. Jacob jumps in to help to say the blood libel is real in exchange for his group being accepted by the Christians. So they hold a second debate where Frank and his group, they start to be called the Frankists, throw mainstream Judaism under the bus and argue that Jews are performing human sacrifices.
The Frankist accusation is often used in later blood libels from the Bailey's trials up to and including the Nazis, right? Or contemporary anti-Semitic literature.
Oh, what does that guy's face look like? I'm just saying.
That's Powell. I'm gonna let him say his last name.
Maciejko.
Maciejko. I'll get it.
Author of Mixed Multitudes.
So the long-term consequences are immense.
But at the time, in the actual debate, they do a terrible job arguing for the blood libel, basically mentioning every time blood or even the color red is mentioned in the Talmud, citing it as evidence that the blood libel is real. The Jews of Poland are watching this, terrified what might happen next. But before it finishes, the local bishop's boss, Christian leaders in Rome, get wind of this debate and shut it down. They don't want a religious massacre breaking out. So the Polish Jews are safe. And the Frankists?
They just wanted to practice their weird cultic sex religion without interference. I don't use the word cult, and I hope you won't either. You know, the rabbis just couldn't contain this heresy. They were worried that it was spreading, and so they made an example of this sect.
The other Jews pushed them to convert to Christianity, and let's not mince words. This was the largest willing conversion ever in Jewish history, an estimated 3,000 people all at once. The priests doubt they were sincere, though. They get 6 of the brothers to confess about their secret rituals, what the Frankists are doing behind closed doors. And for that, they arrest Frank and exile him to a fortress. Now, this kind of echoes what had happened to Shabtai Tzvi about a century ago. There, inexplicably, his movement continues to grow. The beliefs continue to morph.
That, for me, is where it's really weird and interesting. You know, where this whole new kind of Western esotericism thing, where alchemy comes in. I think, like, the quest to live forever and contact the secret race living in a parallel universe is also pretty interesting.
Which is to say, I'm barely even skimming the surface here.
So since then, they've already been discussing.
13 years later, Frank gets out, and like any good cult leader, he does not stop. He sets up a quasi-military group speaking of end times and overpowering the Catholic Church and revolution.
He's released, and they have uniforms, and they have ranks, and they are training with weapons, and you have all this. Now, what's the purpose of it? It is much more difficult to say. If and to what extent Frank is really planning some kind of, big revolution, a universal revolution, or is it just a show? There is evidence that the Frankists are basically selling themselves to the Austrians to act as spies in the Ottoman Empire, right? So the Frankist soldiers are actually deployed.
In his last 5 years of his life, he wants to make sure his movement keeps growing. So he starts this rumor that his daughter Eve is actually the illegitimate daughter of the Empress Catherine of the House Romanov. So when he dies, it's not quite the end of the Frankists. Eve takes over the movement, making her the only female messiah figure in Jewish history, if you can even call it Jewish at this point. She drives the movement into enormous debt, acting like a royal princess of the House Romanov for her final 15 years. And when she dies, the movement slowly dies too, with continued rumors of conspiracies and secret followers in the years that follow, with some false conspiracies that people are still pushing forward today.
Catholics and Christians were going missing on Passover, and then they would find bodies, across Europe, and they were able to trace them back to Jews. Blood libel, they weren't Jews, These were Frankists.
It is the Frankists who are bringing down America.
Frankism, and they created the false left-right paradigm.
With the end of the Frankists, and the Donmed discussed in the previous piece, the final long tail of the Sabbateans, the movements that grew out of the once Messiah Shabtai Tzvi, the Sabbateans became almost a memory, and barely that, as most of the records were destroyed. But back to Frank.
I'm aware of how the Sabbatean story is reduced to just like, yeah, they're sex fiends. And that is definitely not true. What's interesting, I think, about it is not that they were having sex, but that it was included in part of what it is to have a messianic religious consciousness. But if I had to pick as the good guys, bad guys, as between the normative rabbinic persecutors of heresy and the heretics, I am a heretic. So I am clear about where I stand.
I'm pretty clear about where I stand too, and I understand sex is important for procreation, and when you love somebody, it's okay. But at that level, political use of sexuality, ritualistic use of sexuality, that is not a universal way of using that power. But back to the show.
I'm not a Frankist, but I am a heretic.
In my next video, I'm going to use all of
I'm a
this as a
heretic
jumping
too.
off point, because Shabtai Tzvi and Jacob Frank, Baruchia Russo, Eve, they are just a few of the many Jewish messiahs throughout the years, these contenders that claim to be a Jewish messiah. So I'm going to attempt something that I've never quite seen done before, for good reason. I'm going to try to map out the many Jewish messiahs, or the contenders. That is in my next video. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching. Please stay tuned for more content. Subscribe and like. This guy brings awesome stuff. I hope to be able to share all kinds of different messages so we can all get a different voice of opinion and help us draw closer to a Christ consciousness. Thank you.